Welcome back. Now, Ghana has made tremendous strides towards the adoption of a national integrated maritime strategy, NIMS. And NIMS represents a significant milestone in Ghana's journey towards a secure, sustainable, and prosperous maritime sector. Developed jointly by the Ministries of National Security and Transport along with 18 other maritime-related organizations, NIMS is a forward-thinking strategy designed to foster collaboration, promoting innovation, and address critical challenges faced by Ghana's maritime industry. Joining me for a broader conversation on this is Dr. Osei Dixon, who is Director of Policy, the National Security Ministry, and also the Chair of the Joint Ministerial Committee on NIMS. And I also have here Lieutenant Commander Kofi Amponsa Diodu, who is Naval Assistant to Chief of Naval Staff. One to you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Let's, first of all, in common terms,
right.
What is NIMS?
So NIMS is, to put it simply, is now like a Bible for the maritime sector in Ghana.
Okay.
That is the kind of document that we have produced.
Oh.
So it's a document to look at, one, how we structure institutionally the maritime sector, and then also within its legal operational framework. So the entire ecosystem of maritime governance. And then it looks at thematic things that we as a country must do. And those ones you would find deposited in the strategy, I mean, in terms of its objectives. So, for example, I mean, if I may just go ahead and say so. So you have, for example, objective number 1, being strengthening the framework for maritime governance.
Okay.
Objective number 2, you have ensuring safety and security at sea. Objective number 3, you have ensuring a thriving blue economy development here in Ghana.
Okay.
4, you have the protection of marine and coastal environments in the country. And 5, you have capacity building, you have training, you have research, you have awareness creation, and that is where perhaps, for example, you, the media, come in. And then you have the last pillar of it, which has to do with a diversified and dynamic international cooperation, regional and international cooperation. So if you put the whole gamut of all these things together, then you are marching the country towards a different reconstruction in terms of how the maritime governance framework will look like. Because to attain these objectives, it calls for something else. And that is why the middle word there is national, integrated maritime strategy.
Now, every policy intervention is supposed to solve a certain problem.
Right.
What problem is this one solving?
So basically, we find that, how do you call it, if you pick the ecosystem of maritime today, it is extremely, it's in some kind of, I'll say limbo. Yes. And one, in terms of law, legislation, for example. I mean, so we have to look at how legislation is developed to meet the consistently agile criminal threats that we face as a country, both within our region, outside our region, and globally also. And to position Ghana to think in terms of its regional interests and international interests. If you come back to the institutional structure, the document, for example, brings into existence, for the first time in the last 6 years, it brings into existence a National Maritime Council. That has never, ever happened before. It brings into fruition a National Maritime Coordinator. So you have a NIMS coordinator, for example. That has never happened before. Okay. So you have different spectra of actors within this space. You have a plethora of institutions that are there. But you need to have coordination. Just like you do have for the national security architecture, you have a coordinating mechanism in the nature of the national security coordinator. You don't have somebody like that when you come to the maritime sector. Okay. Indeed, you have, for example, the Maritime Authority and things like that. You have Navy, you have other actors. Now you have to think about blue economy. Okay. Everybody's thinking about blue jobs. How do we, the sea is worth, the oceans are worth about 24 trillion. The oceans that you see.
Dollars.
Yes, 24 trillion. So they are an alternate wealth for every country. And for littoral states and coastal states, it's a monumental gain if you have the sea by you. But how are we tapping it? So those are the issues that I'm sure maybe in the fullness of time as we delve into the discussions we would.
Commander, I mean, when it comes to the sea, that's your turf.
Yes.
How does this NIMS, makes your job better?
Okay, so I think as it stands now, we are trying to implement something called harmonized standard operating procedures, where there are rules that say that, okay, if you arrest a vessel for illegal bunkering, as it states now, we have about 5-6 actors. Ghana Review Authority will come in, GMA will come in, if it's within 6 nautical miles, GAPOA will come in, NPA will come in. We've tried to have something called a harmonized standard operating procedures so that there is a termination point for every institution. Navy arrests, you hand over to maybe Marine Police hands over to Attorney General, NPA. So all these things are standard operating procedures, but there has to be an overarching policy that kind of brings all these things home.
Okay.
So that's what the names are. It makes my job very easy because I know that if I'm arresting, this is where my job ends. This is where this person comes in. And there is accountability along the line throughout till we have legal finish. Okay. So having the names implemented will make my work and the work of the Navy very easy. And it also brings synergy. Today, fisheries may be buying an equipment that the Navy needs. Maritime Authority may be buying the same, but if we consolidate, we can get the best with the meager resources that we have, and we'll ensure efficiency as well.
Happy you mentioned the equipment, because I know that's one of the things that, the challenges that confront, Navy. So how does NIMS solve that? You mentioned that it will bring about standardization, but really, in terms of navies or the work of the Navy on the high seas.
Okay. So since this is going to be like everybody coming together to chip in the little they have to build what we need. If there is direction, resources are put together, priorities are set, and then investments are made. So having these names will kind of synergize everything. We all look at, okay, this is where the country wants to go. This is what I need to do my job. So if there's a budget that is going in, finance knows, there is a lot of money being lost to illegal bunkering. Over $1 billion in a year. So if this financial aspect is known to Ministry of Finance, and I tell you that invest this amount of money for me to do my job, it makes it easy for me. But the good thing is all these things are happening at a time when we have this conference where the launch will be launched. It's called the International Maritime Defense Exhibition and Conference. The equipment you speak about, most of these companies that make them in the world will be there. So whilst we launch the NIMS, the solution providers will also be there for us to see what we need. And the conversation is happening around all the stakeholders locally and internationally, as well as those who make and manufacture these products. So it's not just talk, but the people who are involved in the nitty-gritty is also there. Exactly, yeah.
Doc, Ghana is a country noted for beautiful policies. When it comes to document, we are the best. But our challenge is effective implementation, not just implementation, effective. What's the strategy being adopted to ensure that there's that effective implementation of this NIMS policy?
Yeah, so, I think, Kojo, you're right. So that has been the nemesis of this country and many other countries for that matter. And one of the important things that sometimes we need to bear in mind has to do with, first, the institutional makeup when you are even devising policy. That's ab initio, how you constitute it. I think that the way NIMS has been, we've orchestrated it in terms of the consultations that have gone on, and then also the kinds of divisions of labor that has gone on in this particular document, assigning, for example, responsibilities that are well attuned to GMA, those that are well attuned to the Navy, for example. As for example, in incident response. If you listen to what he was talking about, you're talking about HSOPs and things like that. This is very, very important. But there's a big domain there that the Navy plays a role in incident response, particularly, for example. Those have been well farmed out. So we've also tried to learn from previous defects in previous policy implementation. Normally, I always say that, amateurs produce a strategy. Serious professionals implement it. Okay. And that is where we have to prove our mettle. But over the course of the last few years, I think that this country is also learning, we are also learning our lessons by that. And if you pick, for example, the incidentals that occurred before the strategy was even first hammered out, those same conversations about how do we implement this and building a proper architecture that can help for proper implementation were quite foremost in our minds. And in most strategies sometimes, the failure is you not have somebody who will go ahead and implemented, you need some particular person who will be doing that day-to-day job, not as a part-time job, but as a full-time job, as something that they are concerned with, as a national objective. We must internalize and ingrain that. And I think that that is where the NIMS comes in.
So that's the work of the coordinator?
So they fixed that kind of problem. I mean, even in previous discussions that we've had, what you're saying was right. Because at some point, you would find a document that had been made, and different entities were going to implement different facets of it. But who would you hold responsible for it eternally? So I'll give you an example. And Kofi will bear me out here. If you pick this document, it allows for review. So this document is crafted or hammered out in 2023. It's going to be reviewed in 2028. It's going to be reviewed in 2033.
Okay.
These are well clear in our minds. And apart from that too, you have an implementation plan. Most of the documents that come out, sometimes they even lack an implementation strategy. So all the focus was only based on let's develop a strategy. But there's a deficit, particularly when it comes to the IP, the implementation plan. There's no plan about it. And I think that we must give credit to a number of persons who have helped us here. The UNODC, for example, the Danish Embassy, the United States Embassy, CSDS Africa, SEMLAWS, GOGME, and a raft of agencies helped us to arrive at that. So we are much more confident today, 2023, than we were maybe if you pick about like 20 years ago, 10 years ago when strategies were being made. We've learned a lot. I, for example, have been part of cyber strategy, part of developing the national, the border strategy, part of the development of the national security strategy. So it's been...
You've lived it.
Exactly. It's not as if we're learning from a textbook. I mean, these are practical things. We've gone to other countries to go and see how they are also implementing. Kenya, South Africa, Botswana, and the like. And it is for the benefit of our country, to put our country in the best position. So I think that I have a lot of confidence, and you, the media, should be spreading that word to them.
We are spreading it. That's about wrapping up. We know there are critical stakeholders, like the oil and gas companies, because your work involves them, the fishing community, and the fishing community is the coastal community. How well are they involved in this?
Okay, so I would beg to digress a little bit, if you permit me.
Okay, but you have to do all of this in just a minute for me.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because
so all this is happening at the International Maritime Defense Exhibition and Conference. The Navy hosts that every 2 years to bring stakeholders within Ghana and outside together to have this conversation. Hitherto you have the big powers organizing events, they set the agenda, we go. But now the Navy is setting this agenda for the regional powers. Regional leaders meet to decide the future of our region. So the Gulf of Guinea states are going to be present at the launch of the NIMS and as part of the International Maritime Defense Exhibition and Conference. This is the 3rd edition. It's locally owned. So I have all the international companies coming in. So all the fishers, all these associations, they've been involved in this IMDEC over the past 2 editions. This is the 3rd one. So there's enough consultation from discussions are being held all the time. And the theme for this year's conference is consolidating the gains made in the Gulf of Guinea, the role of stakeholders and technology in sustaining a safe and secure maritime domain. And it's going to be at Bema Camp tomorrow, 8:30 sharp. The president is going to be
there. Yeah. And I think you are going to, is there a ship that you are going to, is a part of it? Or?
No, those are model ships. But when Joy FM and the Joy team decide, we'll take you out.
Okay, thank you so much for coming.
But can we say a final word myself too?
That should be 20 seconds.
It can be less than that.
Okay.
So I think that a lot of credit must go to the Minister for National Security, the Honorable Albert Kantapa, for the leadership he's shown, particularly with this particular strategy.
Okay.
Same must also go to his brother, the Honorable Siama for Transport, and then also to the CNS, the Chief of Naval Staff, Rear Admiral Issa Yakubo.
Okay.
I think these 3 personalities, including the boss of the GMA,
Thomas Kofi
Alonzi, must be credited for it.
All right.
And then maybe yourself, Joy from.
Thank you very, very much. So I had with me Lieutenant Commander Kofi Amponsa Diodu, who is the Naval Assistant to the Chief of Naval Staff, and also Dr. Ofosu Osei Dixon is Director of Policy and Chair of the Joint Ministerial Committee on NIMS. Grateful to have you here. All the best to you. All right, and that.